Oh, look at you all.
Hi.
Oh, it is so good to see you on this sunny November Saturday morning afternoon. We're going to give a couple of moments to the rest of the folks coming in. If you haven't tolerated me before, my name is John Baringas. My pronouns are he and him, and I get to serve as Director of Admission and Financial Aid at the Putney School, which makes me very happy. This is good. You should see yourselves. In fact, if you can, you might want to make sure you're in gallery mode so you really can see each other, because it's a smiling group of folks who come in with burning curiosity, I think. I want to believe that. Give it one more little moment or so. I'm going to do some housekeeping before we start. If you would please make sure that your microphone is off and your camera is on, that would be super cool. We've got a nice crowd, so we're probably going to end up using the chat room for different things. You've probably seen the schedule when you looked at the information page, but we've got a lot to share with you today, and we're just super excited to do so. There's going to be a set of breakout sessions in the latter part of the program. And during those breakout sessions, the way that we will know which breakout room to put you in is if you put, instead of your name, you put a code up there. So Anouk Noir, what a great name. So I'm going to borrow your name for a second. So when we get there, and I'm sorry I'm mispronouncing it, I'm pretty sure, but Anouk is going to go to the upper right-hand part of her screen. She's going to click on the 3 dots, and she's going to get a chance to see rename as one of the options, I think. And in her name at the front, she's going to put in CTL if you want to check out the breakout session that's for the learning support area. Just a C if you want to check out the support area for counseling. And a CC for college counseling. I know there's a lot of C's going on. It just worked out that way. We'll go over it again later and we'll put it in the chat room, but just so you know, down the road, we're going to have that tactile opportunity, even if it's a pain in the neck. I also want to let you know that we plan to record the session because there are folks who really wanted to be here today and who aren't able to, so we want to be able to share it with them. And I hope that's okay. I'm not asking permission as much as saying we're going to do it, and if it makes you really uncomfortable, don't stick with it and we'll figure out another way to connect. One last thing, and then I'm going to hand it off to our head of school. At the end of the program, after the breakout sessions, and you'll have a chance to go to 2 of the 3 groups. If you want, you can come back at about 2:30, I think it is, to do any questions that have come up during the time. Emily and I will be ready to field questions for 10 or 20 minutes at the end of the program. And the point is, if you don't have questions and you feel like you got what you came for, don't feel like you have to stay on. I will send out a note tonight asking you how it went and if you have any other questions, and of course, encouraging you to be in touch if you haven't been. But boy, it's really great to see you. I'm happy to introduce Emily Jones, our head of school. Take it away, Emily.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for taking a little bit of time away from watching election results to spend with us this afternoon or this morning if you're on the other coast. It's great to see you all. Some of you I have seen already as you've done virtual visits to the Putney School, so it's good to see your faces again. Our goal in the admissions process is sort of complete and total transparency. We want you to understand who we are, what we do, why we do it, what's possible, what's not possible. So we're not about showing you all the bright, shiny pieces of Putney, although there are plenty of those, but just letting you have a sense of really what it is to be a member of this community. It is a community that expects everybody to be a part of it. There's no passengers here. So spend a lot of time asking questions about that, and then specific things that you're particularly looking for in a high school. We're pretty different. Mostly, I think, in a very good way, different, but it takes some exploration where you can't just sort of look at a catalog and figure out the Putney School. So enjoy, listen to students and faculty talk with you, ask lots and lots of questions. Let's get started.
Brian? Where's Brian?
I'm here.
Good. What's next? Because I don't have the program anywhere near me.
I think we're starting with some stories, and I think Seth's going to introduce that.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
hi. I'm Seth Landman. I'm an English teacher here. And we are going to tell a few stories about things that we've experienced over our time at Putney that we think might be interesting for you to hear about, or that seem particularly important to us. And when I say us, I'm talking about me and Kate, who's another, the Dean of Faculty here and an English teacher also, and then 3 students, Reed, Larry, and Maru. So we'll go, I'll tell my story first, and then you'll hear from Reed and Larry, and then Kate, and then Maru. And we'll talk a little through them, and then and we'll go from there. So I'll start with my story first. And I want to tell you about one of the first classes I taught here at Putney when I got here 4 years ago. I was teaching a creative writing class here for the first time. And, you know, I've been studying creative writing for basically my whole academic life. And I came in really excited to teach this class, and I had all these feelings about what I wanted to teach and what I hoped to accomplish in the class. And I planned the class with a ton of readings about the kinds of things we were going to be thinking about over the course of the term at the beginning of the class. And I assigned all these readings, and I was hoping we'd have lots of discussions about them. We'd come to some common consensus about what kinds of things we were going to be talking about, and then we would go from there. And so during the first week, there was a lot of reading to do, and we had a couple discussions that went well. And then towards the end of the week, we were having a discussion in class about a reading I had asked them to do, and no one was talking. And I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. It seemed like they had all enjoyed the reading based on the written responses they had done for homework, but I couldn't get a word out of anybody. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. And finally, one of the students raised his hand and said, "I thought this was going to be a creative writing class. Like, are we going to ever do any writing in this class? Or are we just going to be talking about it all the time?" And I had this real moment where I realized that I was trying to control things too much. And I think, that had come out of my own history with education. And it also came out of a lot of excitement about what I was hoping to teach. But it made me realize that here at Putney, I could sort of maybe give up a little bit of control over what was going on and let the students drive a little bit. And then maybe I didn't need to control every element of what was happening in the classroom, which was really an exciting moment for me. So that's my story. So Reed, will you jump in and tell your story, and I'll maybe ask you a couple questions?
Sure, I will.
Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm Reed. I'm a senior this year. I'm into theater and cross country, and I'm painting. I'm in a lot of different places. But so my story, I wanted to share about my theater experience a little bit. As I'm a senior now, I look back, and there's just one time that really stands out to me, which was within my first few months of Putney. I was freshman, I jumped right into rehearsal, gone to auditions, and we were right in the thick of just making our show. And, I'd gotten to know everybody slowly, and we've been working really hard on the show where it was important to being earnest was the show. So it's a hilarious show. We were all having a blast. And we're at the point now, we're in the middle of project weeks, which I think some of the other students are going to tell you about project weeks. But we're in the middle of project weeks. Everybody's exhausted and so tired. And I looked around at all of my friends backstage while we're waiting to go on. And I just remember saying to everybody, I was like, guys, people do this in their life. This is somebody's job. So it's, I mean, there's not much else other than that. But it was just this really bizarre moment of me realizing like this isn't just a school thing. Yeah.
Reed, could you talk a little bit about like what was the, because you had done theater before you came here. I know
Yeah.
you like showed up in ninth grade already pretty interested in it. What
Yeah.
was so different about the experience of doing a play here at Putney?
Yeah, so I came from my middle school. They always made all the kids get up on stage, whether it was poetry or a coffee house or doing the plays. And I always knew I enjoyed it, you
Yeah.
know, and maybe some of the other kids didn't like it so much. So once I got to Putney, it was kind of everybody wanted to be there all of a sudden. So when everybody wants to be there, you get more done. Everybody's so into it. And it's just like being surrounded by more people who share my same interest.
I think it's so cool that that you had this moment as a ninth grader where you sort of realized that. I think often we separate like school and real life, kind of like we think these are different things. But you had this moment where you sort of realized that you were living your life in the moment. Do you remember like having felt that at other times, or do you remember what that felt like in the moment?
I don't know. It's kind of, I mean, it's like you say, it's hard to kind of connect school sometimes to the actual world.
Yeah,
Um, so I don't know.
it's nice when
But
the moments come through, though.
yeah, but I was also thinking about how, what was I thinking? About like this happened right at the beginning of my experience. So I don't know if I remember this just because it was new, because I'm sure there are countless other experiences, even like a week ago,
Yeah,
but I just, maybe I don't remember them because this was like my first time.
yeah, really
Um,
foundational. Thanks, Reed. Um, Larry, would you mind going next, telling us your story?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Larry and I like Reed. I'm also a senior this year. And I guess the story that I'm about to share with you guys has been a pretty influential one um, throughout my experience here at Putney. So, I mean, coming to Putney, I felt like I had a pretty concrete sense of who I was and what my identity was. And a big part of that was what I was doing surrounding environmental sustainability and justice. And in middle school, I felt I was pretty, to say, woke surrounding this type of stuff. Like I was working in recycling centers. I was helping to develop the school compost system. And I felt like looking at Putney, what had drawn me here was the initiative that the students had towards my very same interest. So I was really looking forward to coming here. But then when I did come here, it kind of, I kind of hit a block where I, where I met a lot of people who were much more passionate than me and much more, had many more ideas. And I just realized like how much I didn't know. And it was really humbling, but also it made me feel hypocritical because there's this one part of my identity that I didn't really tell anyone, and it was that my family worked for petroleum. And for the first few years I was here, I was too scared to tell anyone that. And I felt like I kind of had to live behind a facade. Um, and then last year came around, and during the month of September, during the climate protests led by Greta Thunberg, the campus was really busy, and I saw my friends all so passionate and marching into town with signs, basically like vilifying like the very same companies my like parents worked for. And I felt a sense of guilt, but also a sense of shame. And I was in a space where I was really questioning my identity. Like, was I to try to fit in here and basically denounce my upbringing, or was I to decide to be an outcast? Or at least that's how I felt. And I mean, one night during that week, I was in a room with my friends and I couldn't take it anymore. So I decided to confess, and I basically told everyone, you know, I've been hiding from you. My parents worked for an oil company. And for a solid 5 minutes, or maybe it was 5 minutes, it seemed like such a long time, but the room was completely silent. And then one of my friends was like, "Oh, why didn't you just tell us? We're not going to judge you just for one like facet of your identity." And I felt kind of sheepish, but also I felt really, really, really relieved. I mean, it was just that here at Putney, it's such a welcoming community and it's such a safe space. And you might not always feel comfortable here, but what I learned is that it's okay to be uncomfortable and to question your own identity.
Yeah.
And the community here, there will always be people to like support you. So yeah.
Larry, one thing that really jumps out, I love that story. And one thing that really jumps out at me is like what you were saying about how in middle school you felt like you used the word woke, like you felt you were already like aware of all this stuff around environmentalism. And then you came here and all those like people had ideas you hadn't thought about yet. And like there was all these new things to consider. And I'm just wondering how that like it feels like that's the journey in some ways. That's the journey you're describing in terms of how you feel about identity, that like you can feel like really locked into one particular part of yourself, and then you realize actually we're made up of all these different complicated things. And I just wondered like how, like in what ways have your ideas gotten more sophisticated around the environment, like how you think about the environment maybe since you got here, or identity, or both, or
Mhm. I mean, in terms of identity, I feel like, and the environment, I feel like I was just like kind of choosing to be ignorant or afraid of this one particular side of my identity because I felt like it contradicted everything that I was trying to work towards and represent. But now I feel like my view has kind of changed, not in like surrounding what I believe around the climate, but like having this, I'm appreciating that I have, I began to appreciate that I had this dual perspective of being on both sides.
yeah.
And, like using that to understand and just help me navigate the things I'm interested in.
Yeah, I think that that's really coming through. It's true that the contradictions are kind of like where we learn about ourselves in a lot of ways. Thanks, Larry. Kate, will you go next? I don't see you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kate, and I'm the Dean of Faculty, and I teach English. And I've been at Putney for 7 or so years now. And the story I want to share with you is about a student I met when he was in the 10th grade, and I think it was my first or second year here. And he showed up in my narrative nonfiction writing class and declared pretty early on that he was not into English and not a writer, and pretty clear that he told me I'm a scientist and I'm into research and labs. And I said, okay, that's okay. And we bumbled along a little bit in our relationship, but one of the things that's great about teaching at a progressive school is we get to know the kids really well and can sort of feed them content that suits them. So I remember specifically giving him Einstein's Dreams, which is a really great piece of imaginative work about what it might be like to be Einstein and have dreams, and what they would be, and Lewis Thomas. And I just gave him stuff that I thought he might like to read, hoping I could get him excited about writing. We did fine. We talked about baseball a lot too, as I recall. And that was sort of it. And then a full year later, he came into my office in the administration building, and I was a little surprised to see him. I hadn't seen him. And he came in and sat on the sofa right behind me and said, Glenn tells me I have to learn how to write. And Glenn is a forceful science teacher at the Putney School. And I said, okay. He said, yeah, if I'm going to spend my life in labs, I guess like I have to learn how to write in order to write science. And I said, okay. And then his teacher walked in and said, we need to figure out how to get him writing really great science. And I said, sure. And we set about designing an independent study for him that, because we had found his motivation and we didn't have a course that was devoted particularly to writing science. And he knew exactly what his skill set needed to be. So we designed together a science teacher and the student and I set about creating an independent study for the fall of his senior year. And I thought I knew what it was to stand sort of shoulder to shoulder with a student and learn alongside them, but I really knew nothing about what it was to write science. And I had to do a lot of work to do that. And the three of us had a ball. And it was a really great opportunity because I didn't even know what I didn't know in terms of what it is to write science, and scientists share their discoveries through writing and reviewing each other's writing. So I learned a lot. And I feel like Gabe, the student, was really teaching me in a lot of ways. And I was a really great reader of his work, because if you can explain basic scientific principles to me, then you're really super clear, because I do not have a science mind.
Kate, I'm just struck by, you described like the experience of being, you said shoulder to shoulder with your student, but like learning in the moment with a student. And you said the three of you had a ball together. And I'm struck that at a lot of places, it feels like that would be a big ask of a teacher to be in that position, that would feel either like you were like put out or terrified or like whatever might happen as a result of being in a situation as a teacher where you're with a student and like not ahead of them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, does it feel like, it feels to me like that's a thing that happens to me here more often than any place I've ever been. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
I think it is a big ask in terms of time, but I think what ends up happening is because the student is the one that's driving it. It's not nobody's doing it because they feel like they should. And so, I mean, I'm sure there were days when I thought, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? And yet, I learned a lot, and and the student had a great time being the expert in my presence. And I always think about learning and that sort of lift that learning gives you when you're really in a learning moment. It's energizing.
For
So
sure. Yeah. I've had that experience too, weirdly enough, as an English teacher teaching classes that involved science and learning about science. And there's moments where I feel my brain working harder than I'm used to it working, but that's there's so much pleasure in that.
mhm.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. Let's Maru, can you finish us up here?
Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Maru.
Oh, wait, and Maru, I think you're gonna talk about Project Week a little, so could you make sure you talk a little bit about what it is?
Yeah. So I'm a senior, and my story takes place in my first Project Week at this school, my freshman year. And I guess like a basic explanation of what Project Week is it's this thing that happens 2 times a year where the students can pretty much do whatever project they want. And the only process really that you have to follow is that you need to have a teacher that's there to support you with it. And you need to be backed up so they can, track what you're doing and make sure that you're accomplishing stuff and you're learning stuff.
Great.
So-
Great explanation.
Yeah, so this was my first Project Week. I'd never done one before, and I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do or what I even could do. And like I was just having trouble thinking of anything to do. And for some reason, this one thing just kept coming into my brain, which was, wouldn't it be cool if you could work on a car and fix up a car? But I always passed it off as some crazy idea that was just too big, not possible, super hard. Like, I'm a freshman in high school. That can't happen. But I ended up being asked by a teacher what I was thinking I might want to do. And because I had nothing else to say, that's what I said. And she was like, that's an awesome idea. Like, you need to go to Glenn, which is the science teacher that Kate mentioned too. And she was like, he's going to love this idea. Like, I'm sure, this will be great for you to do. Like, I love it. And so I went to Glenn and I brought it up to him, and he was ecstatic. He was so excited about it. And I guess this is where the first half of this big realization that I had was, and which was that I could do, anything was kind of possible at this school or in that Project Week. And that even though my idea had felt crazy, like, they're letting me do it. And at the same time, I had that realization and I thought it was super cool, but I was also skeptical and I guess my ability to be able to do that. But I'm really competitive as a person. And so I decided I just had to see it through and just, see what happened. Maybe I could do it. And one more thing about Project Week is that it's made very clear that failure is okay and it's part of the learning curve. So like, I was kind of like, if I fail, I won't get in too much trouble. Like, it'll be fine. So then we set out to find a car for me to work on. And the week, comes and it starts and we have to figure out what I'm going to fix. And what Glenn tells me is the easiest thing to do is the emergency brake, which felt huge and hard. And I had no idea what it was really. And so it took a lot of energy and it felt difficult and it felt like I wasn't doing the right thing. But by the end of Project Week, I had fixed the emergency brake to the best of my ability. And that's when the second half of the realization came in, which I think was the biggest part of it all, which was that I was allowed to do this crazy thing and I did it and I was capable of it. And it was crazy empowering and it made me feel super motivated, I guess, to just see what else I could do.
That's so great. I'm thinking about something you said about failure just now. And I think you're using that word in a way that's different. Like, there's something that's changed maybe about your idea about what failure is over the time you've been here. Like that, in the way you told that story, it's clear that at some point you thought of failure as like setting out to do something and not getting it done or something. And it seems like you've come around to some other idea of what failure might be. I wondered if maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely at the beginning of the project, that's what I was super scared of. I thought that, that would mean that I'm not good enough or I didn't deserve to even be able to do the project. And I guess what I came to realize was that all failure is just something to, make you try a little harder. You learn more from it, and it makes it so much more satisfying to accomplish it in the end too. Like there have been many points where I've, had little, I guess, failures when working on the car, but it just makes it so much more exciting and so much more fun when it, isn't a failure anymore.
Where are we at with the car?
Well, we're in the 4th year of working on it now. I'm doing it as a class right now, and I'm super, super close to maybe being able to like have it drive, but in like a really janky way, like barely, but I'm close. So
That's amazing. Even if it's janky, that's amazing.
yeah.
Thank you, Maru. Let's see, John, Brian, where do we go from here?
We've got a little bit of time for questions and answers from folks who are visiting with us. So I think probably the easiest way to do that is if you have a question that you'd like to ask any of our storytellers, probably the easiest thing to do is to put your first name in the chat, and then Seth or I is going to call out your name, and you know what? I'll call out your name and Seth will manage the which kid or which person does which. Is that okay? But it only works, visitors, if you actually put your name in the chat. So where are you? I don't see anyone. I know somebody has a question.
You gotta let them type their questions out.
Yeah, I don't know.
David, you have a question?
Am I muted? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. I did have a question I liked all the stories. But I'm specifically going to want to ask Kate, because I was struck by her story about the working with the student to teach writing to the science student. And I wanted to ask her a little more broadly about writing. And if there's how you think about teaching writing, and is there a particular philosophy that across the board at Putney? Does it vary teacher to teacher? Do students, your story suggests that students for whom writing isn't their main interest or passion still learn how to write and need to learn how to write. So yeah, that's my sort of question. I'd love you to address it any way you'd like.
Sure. I'll address this broadly, and then we can connect later if it's not satisfying. But I think Putney is really, really good at giving students over the course of their 4 years here lots of time to explore different parts of themselves, different interests, how to make things, how to get in touch with their creative process. And that's true for all the slow arts, for blacksmithing and weaving and photography and filmmaking and all that stuff. It's also true for writing. So we teach all kinds of writing at the Putney School. And lots of times what that means is you have to get in touch with your own voice first, and then learn how to describe and express your feelings and your ideas. And then when you're good at that, it's a lot easier to write academically, to write analysis. So that's sort of the general philosophy about writing. It fits right into, knowing yourself and being able to express what you're thinking and feeling.
Thanks, Kate. I think our next question was going to be from Ilana.
Hi, we were wondering what model and year car you were working on.
Yeah, it's a 1965 Volvo 122S.
Very cool.
That is cool. Gavin?
Hello, I just wanted I've got a comment and a question. So Kate, when you said it was felt a bit weird to have the student teach you something that you didn't know, I understand that because I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, and a few weeks ago, I took like a 4-month long break because I needed it. But at the end of it, I ended up having to relearn everything from people who were green belts, blue belts, people who were lower ranked than me. And my question that I have is, do you have martial arts at the school? I'm just wondering.
Let's let Emily do that one, Kate.
I'll do that. I think this is my 14th year at Putney, and I think we've had martial arts 4 different times, and it's always been because there's a student that has come and said, why don't you have martial arts? And we've said, why don't you teach it? And there's a variety of ways that students can actually run their own evening arts classes or afternoon programs or this and that. Unfortunately, we still have to let them graduate, and then we have to start over again when there's new interest. We have not for a while, actually, I don't think we have ever when I've been here, for more than about a term hired somebody, but if there's enough student interest and there's a student that is a black belt in something and knows how to teach, we're good to go.
Thanks, Gavin.
For answering my question.
Claire?
Oh.
And maybe this.
So I was wondering, is engineering or robotics a class, and is there a girls volleyball team?
Emily, I think that's yours again.
Okay, yes. We do have engineering and robotics. They tend to be wound into a variety of different classes. So that sometimes they show up in math, sometimes they show up in physics classes. Our math class, all of our math classes include coding. So instead of having to sort of say, I'm going to go and do computer science as a separate thing, coding is enmeshed in every math class because we think everybody needs to know how it works. And a bunch of engineering and robotics sort of comes along with that. And then it's often a huge piece of these project weeks that Maru was talking about, when students either as a group together or individually set about to do something. We had a girl graduate, I think not last June, the June before, and she had done a bunch of independent work in computer science and engineering, and she went off to Berkeley in California, and she looked at the curriculum and put herself in the 3rd level up of their computer science. And she said, yeah, it's good, I got this. Right, so you can go pretty much as far as you want in areas that you want to get really good at here, because we tend to have the people that can help you with that. So it's not about looking in the course catalog and saying, do I have to take this course in order to do that? Does that make sense? You'll have a lot of opportunity to pursue things that you really care a lot about.
Thank you, Emily. And Seth, you did a bang up job. Thank you so much for sharing with us kind of what it is to be in your class, I think. Storytellers, that was wonderful. Isadora, Angela, Elle, Luchik, Kaya, and Abram, I'm so glad you have questions, and I have to give you an invitation to do one of 2 things. Write your questions in the chat and we'll get back to them, or bring the questions to the session after the breakout sessions, because it's 1:40 and we have to switch gears to the next part of our program. So I don't want you to feel cut off. I want you to feel delayed just a little bit, kind of like the counting of the votes. So Brian, are you, or is it Michael?
Yeah, so I just want to remind everyone, our 3 breakout room sessions are the Center for Teaching and Learning, Counseling, and College Counseling. And to change your name, please put in front of your name CTL if you would like to go to the Center for Teaching and Learning, just a C if you want to go to counseling, and CC for college counseling. And it's important that it goes in front of your name, because on my end, doing the tech stuff, it sorts it alphabetically. And so that way it just makes it way easier. So if we can do that now, that would be great. And that way, when we're done watching this nice film about the farm, I can quickly move you into your breakout rooms. So off to you, Michael.
Hi, I'm Desi. I am a second-year sophomore at the Putney School, and we're in our front garden. This growing season alone, we have sent over 6,000 pounds of produce to the Putney food shelf, and just today we sent over 500 pounds, about 500 pounds. Lately, we have been harvesting like later season root vegetables such as beets, carrots, leeks, and we've also been clearing out greenhouses full of tomatoes, planting spinach, and, just getting ready for the winter. We milk approximately 35 cows and produce 100 gallons of milk a day, raise pigs and turkeys for meat, chickens for eggs, and sheep and alpaca for fiber to be used in our fiber arts and weaving studio. Jersey. Momo. She looks really funny and my dad calls me Momo, so we're bonded for life. At 5:30 every morning, I wake up and I trek to the barn and I milk cows. This is one of the cows that I don't milk because she just gave birth today. This is Heart, and this is her son who doesn't have a name yet. I personally find it really meditative to just come here in the morning and set up the milk room and milk and do the exact same routine, and it takes around the exact same amount of time. And I find it a really good way to start my morning. And it's also not quite winter yet, so walking from my dorm to the barn, I get to walk through the pasture and over the hill. It's actually really beautiful when all of the mountains are slightly covered in fog. Our milk goes to 2 local artisan cheesemakers and Cabot cheese. So you're eating Cabot cheese? Think of the ladies. Thanks for visiting the farm and garden. Hope to see you in the fall.